What's up, YouTube? This is Rybo at the Bench, and tonight I thought I'd do something a little bit different. So I want to do a head-to-head comparison of the steel wheel Modus and the Civivi Baklash. I think these are very similar knives. They're both very good knives. You can't go wrong, so don't worry. Whichever one comes out ahead, they're both fantastic knives, but they're very similar. If you look at them side by side, they're similar in size, although the Baklash is a little bit bigger. They're similar in design, very similar blades, choils, handles, etc. They're both flippers on bronze, and so I thought it would be really fun to just kind of do a head-to-head comparison of these two really good little budget knives. I think they both come in around $40. I can't remember exact prices. This one's fairly new. This one has been around for a while. So let's get into it. In order to do these head-to-head reviews, I'm going to use these different categories. So pocket clip, scales, overall size, which really includes height, width, thickness, how does it carry in the pocket, just kind of which one does a better job of the size. Ergonomics, the action, they're both flippers on bronze. I think this is on bronze bearings. This is on bronze washers, I believe. So that'll be a fun comparison. The blade itself, just kind of the size, the shape, just which one's a better slicer, that kind of thing. Steel, which is fairly objective, probably the most objective one on this list. The lock system, so both of these are liner locks, but they kind of do each in a different way. And then what I'm calling the intangibles. So basically that was just because there are 8 other categories I didn't want to tie, and so I have this category of the intangibles, which is just all things considered. When you put everything into one package, which one do I find myself reaching for and why? You know, which one is the more enjoyable knife to use over time? And that's kind of what I'll call the intangible. So let's get into it. In order to do the rankings, what I'll do is I'll use these little stickers that I have and just kind of toss each on the side, and we'll count them up at the end. So, pocket clip. All right, starting off pocket clip, you can see nothing too crazy here. You have a deep carry clip here, and you do not here. So it'd be easy to just say, okay, well, advantage Baklash. However, it does go a little bit deeper than that. So yes, deep carry clip is an obvious win here, but it goes a little bit further than that. The Modus pocket clip has probably been my least favorite thing about the Modus, maybe with the exception of the flipper here, which I'm sure I'll get into in a little bit. But you can see on the Modus here that it's a very shallow ramp. You have, not a very long clip here. And so you're going up that ramp in a very short space. And so what that means is you have a very tight clip. You combine that with the fact that you're coming down onto this texture, and this is not enjoyable to get in and out of the pocket. It's very hard to get into the pocket because you don't have a very high ramp right there. And then it's just very, very tight. Whereas on the Baklash, this thing is a much longer clip. It's got a higher ramp. This comes out a lot further, and you have a very, very springy pocket clip there. Combine that with the fact that you have a deep carry clip here, and this is a definite win for the Baklash. So 1 point to the Baklash. All right, scales. So we have G10 and FRN. So the G10 is pretty standard. It's not too grippy, but it's grippy enough that you can feel kind of the texture of it. Looks really nice in tan. I know there are a couple other color options for this. Some very nice contouring on here. Just overall looks really nice. On the Modus, you have FRN, and you have this really, really cool texture, which I've always been a fan of. Because if you look at it, it's very detailed, and the texturing is actually layered twice. And so the result of that, and it's something you don't really pick up on until you've used the knife for a bit, is that this is a very grippy texture. And so I like that a lot. You don't really see this kind of pattern, this design on a lot of knives, but it's really cool, and I like that a lot. I think this looks really nice. The colors that they offer here, are really nice. And so, really these are about the same. I don't think objectively you could say one's much better or worse than the other. So this one really comes down to which one do I like more. And while I like both of them, I think advantage has to go to G10. I really like G10 as a material, and especially a tan G10, because I think it will kind of pick up some nice patina and that wear. Plus I like where you can see the different texture depending on kind of the contouring here. I think that's a really, really cool detail. It just makes this feel less manufactured, even though we all know it's a Chinese knife. This one, super, super cool. Love the detail there, but it feels, I don't know if it's just the plastic or what, it feels like it's a very manufactured knife. And so I'm gonna go ahead and give the advantage to the Baklash yet again. Overall size. All right, so the Baklash is a bigger knife. There's no question. So it's a little bit longer, you can see. And for that, you get a longer blade. And so if you line these up, you can see you're getting a little bit longer blade here, a little bit longer handle. If I put 4 fingers behind there, you've got a decent amount of space. If you choke up, you've got a ton of space back here. On the Modus, you've got plenty of room for 4 fingers, not quite as much, and you can't really choke up because there's not really a finger choil there. But you have plenty of space on the knife. This has a little bit, or at least seemingly wider blade. This has a swedge at the top, which I think kind of gives it an air of having a smaller blade. And so, you know, overall, I think the size on both really makes sense. You know, this is a bigger knife. It's carrying in a bigger package, and I think it's a little bit thinner than the Modus. So if you put the Modus down, you can see it's just a little bit more rounded, whereas the Baklash is a little bit thinner. And really, that comes into play in the pocket. And so this is where I think the size really comes into play. So in the pocket, these feel like 2 very different knives, even though they're about the same size. Surprisingly, to me at least, this knife feels a lot smaller in the pocket, even though it's not. And I think that's for 2 reasons. One is the deep carry pocket clip. Obviously, it's going to carry a little bit deeper. It's a thinner knife, and so this is going to feel like it's just tucked away a little bit more in the pocket. The other thing is the flipper. And so while it might not look like it, you know, you can see that this pocket knife has a cant on the pocket clip. And so while this one is pretty straight on with a slight cant, and you can kind of see that, this one has a very steep cant where you're carrying a lot of the knife inside, which is great in general, except for you still have this hump right around here and you have this flipper sticking out. You definitely have a flipper sticking out here, but if you notice the direction of the flipper, this one is coming back into your hand. It's like swooping back into your hand, while this one is swooping away from your hand. And while it may not seem like much, that is something you really, really, really notice in the pocket. I've complained about that with this before, but when you're going into your pants pocket like this, you're hitting up against this right here, and you're also hitting up against this texture right here. So this is a metal backspacer that has this texturing, and it is proud of the surface of the scales. And so anytime you go in the pocket, you're rubbing up against that, and then you're hitting that right there. And so what does this have to do with size? I know that's not a size thing, but what that kind of leads to is a feeling that this is a much bigger knife in the pocket, when in reality, this is a much bigger knife. It just doesn't feel that way in the pocket. So in my opinion, from a size perspective, this guy does a better job of taking a large knife and making it feel like it's not a large knife. So once again, I'm going to give the advantage to the Baklash here. All right, so Baklash is kind of running away with it, but I think things are about to change. Let's go to ergonomics. So ergonomics, let me open both of these guys up. You can see this has a little bit more contouring to the fingers, and so you have a very, very comfortable handle there. You cannot choke up like you can on the Baklash, and so you have this nice finger choil up here. However, there's really not a ton of contouring here. There's a little bit right there, and it's a thicker knife. You're feeling the liners a little bit more. And so while there's absolutely nothing wrong with the way the Baklash feels, this one's definitely more comfortable. It feels like it's made for your hand, and it just kind of falls naturally right in place. And so I would say that the advantage in this case goes to the Modus. All right, next up, Action Detent. This is an interesting one. So both of these are flippers that have very, very nice action. Both of these just fly open, they drop shut, no complaints at all. Just really, really satisfying, very kind of fidgety knives. This one particularly just drops shut and is very, very nice. And so, very, very satisfying action detent on both. I know everyone raves about the detent on the Civivis, and it's fantastic. However, to me, the Modus wins out a little bit for two reasons. One, it's got just an incredible drop shut, and if you can hear this, that drop shut just very, very satisfying compared to the Baklash. Just sounds a little bit cheaper. And so this is a little bit more satisfying. I think the action on both is totally fine, but I think it is a little bit smoother on the Modus. So I'm going to go ahead and give the advantage to the Modus on that one. All right, the blade. So these are two different blade styles. You have this kind of, semi-sheep's foot style here. You have this kind of spear point with a nice deep swedge here. A little bit shallower blade here, and much thicker blade on the Modus here. So really this one comes down to which blade is a better cutter, at least for me. I think the thicker blade on the Modus lends to it being more drop shutty than the Baklash does, although this one drops shut just fine as well. And so, to me it comes down to which one have I enjoyed cutting with more. And while this one is a fantastic slicer, I think this one has been a better slicer. I've used this to cut fruit. I've used it to cut cardboard, tape, packages, that kind of thing. It's always done a really, really nice job. Granted, I've only had it for a couple days, but it's done a really, really nice job. This one, however, fantastic slicer. It's worked just fine. It's a little bit thicker blade and it's thicker down to the tip. And so it just hasn't been quite as good of a slicer as this one, which I kind of surprised me because the hollow grind on this one is a little bit more intense than it is on this. This is pretty much a flat grind. So I was kind of surprised by that, but I'm going to give the advantage to the Baklash. All right, steel. This one, just going to go ahead and throw this here. This is D2. This is 9CR18 MOV, which is a Chinese steel. It's fine. It's held up, pretty decent so far. But D2, I would rather have any day. So advantage Modus. Lock system. So like I mentioned, both of these are liner locks. This is kind of an integrated liner lock into the FRN scales. And while I probably cannot get it on camera, these are skeletonized liners down here, which maybe you can see, maybe not. These are also skeletonized liners, but these are full liners across the G10. So you have a much thicker knife because you have these full liners. And I'm just going to add, aesthetically, I hate the blue. Not a big fan. I'll probably sand it down. But you can see the liners there, whereas here they are integrated in the handle. And so to me, I like the look of this better than this. I think this is probably a beefier, stronger knife because of the full liners. However, this, because they're integrated, I think that it's a little bit more enjoyable. It's a little bit easier to disengage that liner lock. And I think it leads to an all-around nicer, kind of more efficient, smoother knife to have them inside of the FRN scales than just right up against the G10. If you look, not everything is totally flush, which is really, absolutely fine. But it gives it a little bit of a, cheaper feel to it. So I'm going to give the advantage to the Modus on that one. So that leaves us with a dead tie, and I did not plan that, but this is why the Intangibles category is there. So, Intangibles. Which knife am I reaching for when I'm looking for something to carry or something to cut? I'm really tempted to say this guy. The Modus is a great knife. It has a really nice blade. I just love the blade geometry here. I love the style. I really like how thick the blade is, how it tapers down on that nice flat grind. I think it's a very, fidgety knife. It's really fun to just sit here and open it. Very, very smooth. I've always been very impressed by how solid this feels. And honestly, if I had to say intangibles in terms of which one feels like a more expensive knife, I would definitely say the Modus. There's something about it, just, even from the sounds that it makes when it closes, compared to something like this. It's just a little bit more tinny on here. And so this one just feels a little bit tighter, a little bit stronger, more rigid, and just a little bit more expensive. And I think that's probably has a lot to do with the integrated liner, inside there. So I'm really tempted to say the Modus. However, I've had the Modus for probably over a year now, and it's pretty much out of my rotation. I said in my cutter carry video that it was a carry for things like yard work, camping, that kind of thing. But honestly, it's not really a carry for that. And it's really all about that pocket clip. I absolutely hate the pocket clip on this. It's not enjoyable. It does not slide in the pocket. It's very difficult to carry. And this thing just rubs my hand raw. And I just always catch my hand on this flipper, which is sweeping up. And so honestly, to me, this has it all. This is a huge knife that carries like a much smaller knife because of that nice deep carry pocket clip. I don't love the look of the blue liners. However, that's something that I think would be easily fixable. I love the G10. I think it's a very comfortable knife. It's textured without being, too textured. The deployment is really fantastic, and that finger choil and how much you can choke up, to do different tasks just really, really make this a compelling option. And so practically speaking, when I reach for a knife to cut something, I'm reaching for this one. And so I have to give the advantage to the Baklash. It's been an incredible slicer. I think the blade's really nice, looks cool, but it also cuts very well. A lot of times you'll see knife companies do a blade shape like this, and it just doesn't really work. Gerber comes to mind. But this one really does. There's something about it. It slices very cleanly. I love that finger choil. I think that's just phenomenal. It's absolutely fine to hold in the hand. The contours are really nice. It's a fairly light knife. I'll do a weight when I do the full review. And that deep carry clip just really makes it for me. It feels great in the pocket. I don't notice it, and it drops shut very nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and give the victory to the Civivi Baklash. However, it was very tight. I think they're both great knives, especially for the price. They are just phenomenal at under $50 and probably under $40. So winner goes to the Baklash. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully I'll be back with more soon, and see you later.